Hi, welcome to ThinkTech. We are raising public awareness in technology, energy, diversity, and globalism. This show is Center Stage, and I am your host, Donna Blanchard, very proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theatre. We are coming to you live from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu, very near Kumukuhua Theatre. Today I'm going to be talking with two women from Dog and Pony DC Theatre. They are Rachel Grossman and Ivania Stack. Sorry about that. We're going to get to them in just a moment. First, I want to let you know that our shows run live on ThinkTechHawaii.com every Monday through Friday afternoon. You can also catch our shows archived on ThinkTechHawaii.com, and they are all archived on YouTube. And if you would ever like to join us in the downtown studio audience, please email j@ThinkTechHawaii.com. Now I can get to my guest, and I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. It's a pretty easy one, too, so I really apologize.
The first name
Ivania,
you got, exactly.
I got that one. All right, awesome. Ivania and Rachel. Yeah. I'm so excited to have this conversation because what you're doing I find absolutely thrilling and terrifying at the same time. So to be able to talk with you about it is pretty awesome. In a nutshell, I'll just say that last week, you had a workshop here at Honolulu Theatre for Youth that I attended, and I'll let you talk about how you ended up being here. But it was about devising theater, to me. It was about devising theater that fully involves an audience in the work, not just the closest I've ever come to this before is doing improv and having the audience give suggestions that you work on later, but it looks to me like your work actually involves the audience in more than a cueing process.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool. Would one of you please begin by telling us why you are here in Hawaii right now?
You want to start with how you got to know Eric and how that conversation started?
We got really lucky because Eric Johnson from Honolulu Theatre for Youth happened to be in DC a number of years ago for, I believe, serving on an NEA panel, saw a lot of theater while he was there, and one of the pieces that he saw was one of our shows, which is a piece called Beer Town. And I think the word one of his colleagues used was smitten. He was smitten with the show. And it started some back and forth conversations, just very like, hey, I saw this work. I was really excited about it. I'd love to talk with you more. While he was in town working with Alvin Chan at another of our theaters in the DC area, one of our theaters for youth called Imagination Stage. And then I happened to have the luck to be out here in Honolulu with a gathering through the network of ensemble theaters, which both HTY and Dog and Pony DC are members of. And I think there's something about the two organizations, even though Dog and Pony DC does not, we don't serve theater youth. Normally, we are not a TYA, with Theater for Young Audiences organization. There was this like kinship, I think is the way, or there was sort of an affinity between the two organizations. Yeah. So we went after some funding to just sort of explore what would it mean to have an artistic exchange between the two organizations. And that's what brought ultimately 4 of us out here to Honolulu for about 5 days of workshop time. A trip we've been planning for about 8 months now. It's hard to believe that, and because we're going home today, it's hard to believe that this has finally come to be. It's been really a dream come true.
Wonderful. And the workshops, so I was part of the initial workshop that other people from the theater community were invited into, and we got to have a little taste of what you do. And then moving forward, were you actually developing a piece with HTY?
Yes, and we, with the performers and with Eric and with the designers at Honolulu Theatre for Youth, over the course of the week, we carried out different explorations of the idea of an exchange between DC public school students and Honolulu public school students and what that might be. And we sort of looked at this idea from many different angles, including what happens if say for half an hour, we just create a little piece about the other, a memory from the other's childhood. So we did that like little thought experiment and created a little performance out of that. Another session, we just actually sat down and like brass tacks talked about what does a show like this look like? What are technological possibilities? What do we have available to us in terms of digital media that could make this happen? What are some questions we have for each other that students might have for students on the other side? And really just started exploring this from all angles and getting a sense. And more than anything, what it showed us is that this could be an actual production, an actual show. And it's by sort of taking it apart and playing with it and having that freedom of time to play and get to know each other and play with the idea, we were able to conceive of that, yes, this could be reality. We could really do this.
So did we actually create a show in 5 days? No. Did we come to understand that we as two companies would be interested in exploring how we might continue to work together, and that would result in, as we are both theater companies that make work, how that might result in a show? Yes, I think that was what was really exciting for both ensembles.
Yeah.
So I think
It
more
is
to
exciting.
come.
And that's something that could potentially be worked on in your own locations.
Absolutely.
You know, technology is cool.
Yeah.
Yes, technology is amazing.
Have you done anything like that before? Have you worked with another theater utilizing technology, you know, Skype or something?
Yeah, which is like such a huge word. I mean, actually, we do a lot. We've not worked with another company long distance before, but we do a lot, even just within the development of the last piece that Dog and Pony developed. Really pushed ourselves to do a lot of devising that allowed, you didn't have to be in the room to be a part of the devising process. A lot of our peer companies, both of HTY's and Dog and Pony DC's from across the country, not all the artists are based in the same geographical location. So it's utilizing, obviously, the telephone, email, but Skype or Google Hangouts, and the occasional in-person meetings to sort of be able to share information and to supplant those in-person live devising sessions with what can we accomplish being as close to in the room as possible.
Another thing we use a lot is we place so much, as we all do, theater makers, so much importance on the dramaturgy of a piece and the research and the materials behind it, inspiration, things we find interesting and relevant. And so what we do a lot in our process is create a shared online folder where all of the information goes. Like, this is a link I saw, this is an article I read, this is a book I want everybody to read, this is a film I watch, and you just we call it the dramaturgical parking lot. So that's where all of that information gets gathered and shared, and everybody has access. And so we've already started doing that with HTY, because that's one way everybody's throwing in what they're getting excited about, something they just popped in their head that they have to share, and then there's that. Because there's a place to do that, people will do that, and it's representative of collaboration to me.
I just had a conversation the other day about a friend of mine from high school who has grown to be a Luddite and just doesn't understand, believes, and we all know people like this who really believe that our devices are eliminating our connectivity when this is so exciting what you can do. I mean, if you're talking about something like Dropbox, I use all the time. I'm from the Midwest. It's a great way to share pictures and information with people and feel more like you are in the room. And I love the idea that more and more theater is being produced that way.
Yeah. Well, and it allows also for, if we think both in the way that theater can be created, but also just the way that our culture in general is moving in that direction of how can we be content creators and curators of our own experience, where we're taking, making, and sharing story in a very broad sense, not theatrically speaking, but just I'm creating an image, right? Or I'm creating music, or a song, or a short video of myself dancing, and I'm sharing with someone else. And whether I'm sharing that in a a public folder that is shared with a collective of artists, or whether I'm sharing that on a Pinterest board or on Facebook or on Tagboard or what have you. That allows me to participate in my own way, in my own timeline. And so for a longer devising process, to bring it back to us, in a longer devising process, it actually allows for a lot more freedom when you're talking about overcoming a geographical barrier, because we don't all have to say and a time barrier.
Time zone.
I mean, let's talk about time. Being here for over a week has given us a really great appreciation of the time difference. Working with a company that's still running on East Coast. So to be able to sort of drop in and say, how do look, there's this information, I can comment on articles and what people are putting together on a small group of folks put together information, I can comment on it, I can like it, I can respond to it in my own time when there's a month to do so, as opposed to, okay, we all have to come to this one point, this one meeting, or this 1 week or weekend or set of rehearsals. So the distance in working digitally allows us that more flexibility.
Even when you're in the same time zone, if you can come to something when it's your time, when
Agreed.
it's your good creative time,
Oh,
which may be
absolutely.
2 a.m.
Yes. Yeah.
For one person, and ungodly hours like 6 a.m. for other people.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about that, how much of that initial conversation goes into your work? You know what I'm talking about? The sharing of ideas, here's something that inspires me. How much of that conversation comes before you actually start digging in and making decisions?
For Dog and Pony DC, typically?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, oftentimes, something we talk about is that our work is inefficient and necessarily exhaustive. And what that means is when you're building a whole new world or building a really rich experience, there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of ingredients that flavor and make that, build sort of the deeper flavors of that pot. And in the past as a deviser, I know that I've been, we didn't use this, and I thought for sure this show was going to be about this, and so I put in all this material about this, and it's not about that. And then you see the final product, as long as you're part of it, and you're like, yeah, it's not that, but that definitely, I can feel a little bit of the flavor of that. And so what's interesting is how everything ultimately informs the final product, even if it's not in a tangible way, even if it's in a subconscious way or something like that. So I've noticed that with a devising session and a devising process. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because it's probably and if you wanted to quantify, you're looking at probably anywhere from two years to 4 years of just percolating, which is very I'm not even aware that I'm percolating on something that's eventually going to be a show, to probably a year and a half of intentional group percolating time or group dramaturgy collecting time.
Okay. Oh, I like that. Okay. So we're going to take a break in 2 minutes. So let's say in 2 minutes, can you tell
Yeah, this is a good test.
Can you tell me what usually happens at that first come to Jesus meeting? You're together, you're going to start
I
moving
love that
now.
you just used that phrase because we used. Well, so let's see, 2 minutes. So we have these. The way our shows normally start is someone comes up to someone and says, "I've been thinking a lot about," and then they say, "This book, this play, this idea, this concept." And so a few of us will start, again, small group percolating at cross purposes. And then there's a larger company meeting for us once a year in which a small group of folks say, we would like to pitch to the company that we start working as a company on a show that has to deal with this set of sources of inspirations, or SOIs that we call them. And for one of our shows, it would be a question of what does it mean to be American, and 2 different novels. And this is the general gist of the show, that we think this would be the audience experience, and how it might push the company forward artistically. And we'd say, great, that's good. And then a small group of people would spend probably another 6 months working that topic before we started moving it forward to that come to Jesus moment, if you will, where we said, all right, what is this actually going to happen? How is this ship going to launch? When is it going to launch? But even then, launching it doesn't mean what is the show going to look like. It means, okay, when are we going to really start working on this for reals, guys, now?
Oh, how many people are in this company?
11 people.
There are 11 people
Yeah.
in the company proper, and probably a community of about 30, what we refer to as regulars. So they're affiliated artists that regularly work with us.
Okay, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to get into what you're working on right now, as well as some more of the background of Dog and Pony. I'm so excited. But we've got to take a break. We'll be right back. This is Center Stage on ThinkTechHawaii.com. Right back.
ThinkTech Hawaii, Hawaii's only live television channel dedicated to featuring local ideas and innovations in technology, clean energy, and global awareness. In celebration of our 15th anniversary, ThinkTech Hawaii invites you to ThinkTech United, a special holiday celebration at the downtown Laniakea YWCA. Join us on December 11th for speakers, poo-poos, awards, prizes, and surprises. And don't miss our featured speaker presentation on leadership by Robbie Alm. If you would like to network, celebrate, and have pauhana with ThinkTech Hawaii, RSVP online at thinktechhawaii.com and reserve your spot today. Mahalo for being a part of our growing audience. Let's keep ThinkTech Hawaii's mission shining bright. See you Thursday.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. I'm Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhue Theatre, and I am talking with Rachel Grossman and Ivania Stack of Dog and Pony DC, Dog Ampersand Pony DC. And maybe it would be good to just talk about the show that you are working on currently, and that would, because what you do is so very different. Do you think it would be better, because you've introduced it more than I have, would it be better to go back and talk about the inception of the company first, or to just jump in and say, this is what we're doing now?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I love it when people say that. You just
I
made
know,
my day.
I don't know what would be better. Let's talk about the inception of the company.
Okay.
Because I think that might be a good lead-in. I don't know what's a good lead-in.
Let's go there. No,
People
this is
look
a
at
good
us
lead-in.
cross-eyed when we're like, you do what?
I know, because it's crazy what you do, that you risk a lot.
There is, and I think there's always a point when we work with new artists that they say, we talk about this in the devising process, that there's this thing, it says, well, what if that doesn't happen? Like, what if the audience doesn't do this? And we say, we just don't worry about that anymore. And so which means maybe we should back up and talk about what we're explaining. Now everyone that's watching is like, what are they doing?
Crazy. Okay, so a group of people were having cocktails one night, is
Yes.
what I'm assuming.
Yeah. So the company was co-founded by myself and two of our colleagues, Lorraine Ressiger Sloan and Wickham Avery. And we originally didn't found, the company is very focused on upending the way theater is produced and consumed in DC and across the country, focusing on providing audiences new ways of experiencing theater. We originally did not found with a focus on the audience experience. We actually had this other focus where we were really looking at ensemble practice, which is very foreign in DC and for many theaters across the country. But it became very clear within the first couple shows that what was most interesting to us was the artist-audience relationship, and what I refer to as the artist-audience art triangle, and how with every show we're sort of changing it from an equilateral to an isosceles to a various sizes of isosceles. I can't think of another name for a triangle. What's another type of triangle? There's only two.
Like a right.
A right angle.
triangle, yeah.
Okay, now we've named three. Excellent. So around our third or fourth show, we came to understand collectively, just as we were starting to form as a larger body of artists, incorporate as a nonprofit, that our focus was based around this principle that we call audience integration, which is the intentional interweaving of the audience in the narrative or experiential arc of a production.
Can I stop you for just one
should,
moment?
and that's the point at which you should stop, and Ivania should start talking.
Had anyone involved experienced something like that before? Because I have never
No.
experienced anything like that before.
No, and I think what was teaching us was moments in the productions we were doing and that they had been doing where the audience did or were given a little bit of agency and took it and ran with it, and it was such a good experience for everyone in the room that it was like, how do we make more room for that?
Yeah.
How do we build in more than that? So, for example, it started even before, but we were doing this production of Courage, which is an adaptation of Mother Courage and Her Children, with a live band on stage, with people, with Courage coming through with her cart, with stuff and junk and stuff everywhere. And when we were talking about that show, we were like, what if it's like a NASCAR experience? What if it's like, and we're talking about these different experiences, and all those experiences, the audience plays a key role in that. And so as you start thinking dramaturgically and design-wise about the space and about the story, you're like, wait, we can't do this unless the audience buys into this too, and that they're excited about it. And then music in the show and the way the band performed and the way the performers talked to the audience, well, it was suddenly like, what happens if the audience gets up and dances too? What happens if there's a mosh pit and the audience are in it? How do we get them to do that? What happens if we pass out free beer to the audience? And how do we develop, so as you have this idea and realize you need the audience in order to get that idea.
Because the only way you can have the audience in a mosh pit in scene 4 is if before the show has even started, the actors are out of character, but clearly in some form of character as just like jovial performer, walking around, hanging out, drinking beers with the audience, and challenging them playfully to games of Twister and push-up competitions. So, which is you can see those two completely unrelated, and yet at the same time, we're talking physical activity, right? That there is some level of like physical interaction.
Get out of the chair.
Get out of the chair. And this is not your typical experience. So this may not be something that's comfortable for you to do, Donna. Like, you're like, I'm not going to play Twister. I'm not judging. I'm not saying that.
I will play Twister.
Okay, great. So there you go. So, but now you have two different things, right? So 2 different options for 2 different types of people. We also had bowling with the empty beer cans and lawn type bowling, and there was all sorts of stuff you could. We also had these
just buy stuff.
You could just buy. We sold things to the audience.
Random junk.
Just random junk that was in all of our. So there's all this sort of thing to get us. We realized if we wanted to get the audience to dance in scene 4, we needed that to happen. So we built all these experiences in order that once this music that was like ding, 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 and all of us are on stage and these 12-person cast are on there and this small and this music is going and we're all dancing. I wasn't in the show. I don't know why I keep saying we. And we are anyway, we're doing it anyway, and we're dancing like this, that the audience is primed and ready, and they know, not only they know that if I look at you and I'm like this, that this is an invitation for you to join us. And the whole environment is already set. So
And you've built trust and a
built
relationship
trust.
with
You
them.
know we're going to be fine.
So
So the company, and that was the moment where we went, oh, this is all we want to do. And we want to see what this looks like. Like if this is the kernel, like how do we push that out to all of its different permutations, and what does this look like with this show and this type? And we just started talking today about if we have a show that's a conversation of ideas. I talk way too much. If we have a conversation that's a show that's a conversation of ideas, what does it mean to have a show that's actually a narrative conversation? Like how do you involve, this makes no sense. How do you have audience that are involved in the creation of a work of art in that they are talking about making art by making art?
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't, and yes.
So meta. Okay.
Exactly.
Can you break that down for
Done.
us?
Yeah, and now Ivania will translate. No. She's like, no.
Well, I think I'm really curious as to what happens when, I think we took a long time to say we want to have conversations that we're not having, and theater is the place where we can have those conversations. Mm-hmm. So we did a production of Beer Town where it's very much a conversation of how are you helping to create the identity of your community, like by having that conversation, by getting up, by debating with your neighbors, how is that? And so that's very much about ideas and talking about them, which sometimes in daily life we're sort of pressured to not do, right? Like we're going to go through life. And then I was wondering, so if there's art, art is in and of itself a conversation, but on a different level, it's a different way of thinking. It's a way of doing ideas rather than talking about ideas, And so how is the audience playing a role in that? Without having art training or performance training or all these things, how are we making a place where they can create the environment, create the space, create the storyline, create everything? And that sounds like, I don't know what. Fill in the blank, choose your own adventure, but I think it's maybe a little bit, in my head, it's still pretty abstract, but it's even more than that.
So do you have people come to see your shows who pretty much know who you are?
Yeah, at this point. They know what they're getting into.
So most people they're ready to engage, or you have people who are ready to sit back and do that?
We have both.
Okay, and that's perfectly acceptable to do either.
Yep.
Yeah.
And very often, which we lovingly say, the person that comes in who says, you should just know, however they just communicate this, you should just know, I don't want to do anything. And we say, okay.
That's
and
fine.
that person is often the very first person to be like, I want to say something, or they're going to get up and we have a show that's about dying, and they're going to die the biggest death in the death scene, or they're going to...
one production we were doing, it was just a workshop of a show we do called Toast, and someone came in and they said, I do not like this audience participation stuff. I'm not into it. I hope you're not going to make me... No, we're not going to make you do anything. Nobody's made to do anything. And by the end of it, this person was voluntarily performing an interpretive dance haiku. Right? And we did not say, you now have to get up on stage and nobody ever
now have
said
to
that.
create voluntarily with your group a performative interpretive dance haiku. And they did.
And they did. And they loved it, probably.
In
and
fact,
went
this
home and
person
told
got
all their
into a
friends.
group when all we did was a performer stood up and said, okay, now everyone will get into groups of somewhere between 6 to 8 people. Of course, you want to get into a group with people that you don't know, for however this was said at that time, because the language is totally different. And we changed it like 3 or 4 times during the workshop anyway. And you had room full of strangers. And it's so beautiful to watch when we test these things, because there's always a part of us that says, what if this doesn't work? Oh no. Even though we don't, that's a secret, so don't tell anybody. And we said and just a room full of strangers start turning to everyone and says, oh, well, hello, I'm Rachel, and okay, so we're going to be at a group. So there was this group of 5 or 6 people, and they got together and talked for 45 minutes about how did they advance the electric toaster into a next generation instrument, and they created a solar-powered electric toaster that would heat their bed, and then wrote a haiku about it and did an interpretive dance in front of 60 strangers at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. I mean, yeah, so. Yeah.
How long? What's the duration of most of your shows? Night by night, you know what I mean?
The shortest show we had was about 50 minutes, and the longest show we had was, Beertown has run on the longest night, I think about 2.5, a little over 2.5 hours. The issue that we have actually is with the audience being involved, it's very difficult to have a very set time. So we did a clown show that if it was just performed, even with involvement with the audience, it was 52 minutes long. Like, we knew very reliably, even with the exact knowing how it was run, it was 52 minutes long. On its longest night, it was 82 minutes long. And that actually meant the long segments were the segments that I was by myself in the theater with the audience. They were sort of interstitial moments in between the sort of larger clown bits. But that's because the audience kept coming up with material. Like, the audience essentially was coming up with the new game which they didn't, I think, realize that they were coming up with a new game that they would then be playing with me. And so they initiated a new game, and I was like, okay, now we're playing the game where we take the wadded up ball of paper and play a game of baseball, right? Or now we're playing the game where you're doing this and I'm doing this and you're doing this and I'm doing this, and now we're clowning, copying, and now we're doing the wave around the room, and so
They
now
just
that
kept coming up
and
with
now
because
that
they were loving it.
right, because
Yeah.
they were loving it.
Okay, we're going to take another break.
Good.
We'll be right back. That happened nice and organically.
Yes.
We're going to take a break. We will be right back, so stay put, please.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard, proud Managing Director of Kumuku'u Theatre. We are coming to you live from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu, very near Kumuku'u Theatre. And I am talking with two wonderful women from Dog and Pony DC. They are Ivania, oops, I just lost something back here. Ivania Stack and Rachel Grossman. I don't know what just happened to me. Sorry, I just made that about me for a moment. Let's talk about you. Which I bet there's always one person in the audience. Do you experience that? There's one person that you sort of have to deal with. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. When you give people agency, some people want to see what that's like. It's because it's new. And so we want to say, okay, well, what does this mean that I have this power that I'm not used to having? And I think that's new. So there is a sense in, if we can use the word testing, right? So we test the limits or the boundaries of how much agency do I have. So yes, but it's playing with them, because essentially it is a back and forth. I mean, we talk a lot about it's your scene partner, the audience. I mean, in this moment, it's your scene partner, Donna, the audience member, right? Yeah. And certainly in our piece Beer Town, you know, we've had an audience member stand up and say, proclaim they were the mayor of Baltimore. We had someone proclaim that same day they were the mayor of Pizza Town.
But you're probably well versed in.
Oh yeah, and the mayor of Beer Town, who is one of the central characters of Beer Town, said, "Great, oh yes, we all met, you know, at the mayor's convention." And then there was this, so had a way of just incorporating that, and that sort of diffuses, if you will, diffuses the situation slightly, but also empowers, because it gives context and world building to their three relationships. It creates a relationship, and now they can go back to them. It actually creates more story. So they gave story, the cast gives more story, and then now they can refer back to it if they want to, and anybody else can add to it as well. Their spouses, other characters, meaning actors in the show, or other characters, meaning audience
members.
That's actually,
and it's, you know, so it's from that improv technique of yes and. If you just shut someone down and say, no, there's no Pizza Town, that's not part of the story we made, then everybody loses, right? But if it's like, oh, welcome, Mayor of Pizza Town, I'm glad you joined us. I know that you were also, you know, in your town, you were also concerned about the closing of the pizza school. And so that then you've yes-anded, and now we can, like, we've brought it back to our story, but also we've added or raised the bar of our story.
Yeah, completely.
So we're going to break down one of your shows. Which one are we going to talk about?
Beer Town.
We're going to talk about Beer Town. It's like what
that's why we came to Hawaii. So.
Also because Eric was enamored, no, smitten.
He was smitten
by it. Okay, so let's start with the creation of Beer Town, may we?
Yeah, Beer Town began in part from the sources of inspiration, like many shows do, and which in this case was the book Winesburg, Ohio, started.
And the book, Everything is Illuminated.
In the book, Everything is Illuminated. So we started with, I think, Rachel and Wickham. Rachel and Wickham, bringing in these texts and saying, like, these are things we really want you to read and get into, and we can talk about them. And one thing that we found really exciting about Winesburg, Ohio, is it's, in addition to talking about the town and the people in it, the way the characters were portrayed sort of as grotesques, which is, you know, the characters were extreme sort of versions of people, of reality. If there was one quality that was magnified to the nth degree, and they were started talking about, what if you create a show where the characters are like this? So one's an archivist, and therefore everything is about recording and archiving and the history and of the town. So if you have a town full of these people that represent different things, you know, if one is a cartographer, then they're all about the mapping and the where and the location and where, how things are in relationship to each other, and they become, you know, so how can you develop characters this way? And so that started some conversation, and then that started a 6-month talking and devising and playing and experimenting sort of time period where we were bringing in a lot of sources. Just based, if we started with those two, then all these other sources popped in and out based on those.
Which included podcasts from Radiolab, from This American Life, a lot of stuff from the WPA, Studs Terkel, a lot of things about maps. This is sort of where Dog and Pony actually cultivated now, which will be a lifelong obsession with the company, with mapping and data visualization.
A lot about prohibition. So we all got really into the prohibition and all of the theory behind it and the era and what women were doing at this time and what was happening in different towns across America at that time. So So
this was the first 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second 6 months, the company is working in 2 groups. One, developing the set of characters that Ivania was talking about. The second is developing was said to develop a plot, or develop some sort of framework. And they came back to say, we developed a framework which was around a town hall meeting. And the town hall meeting they developed was about voting on whether or not the town of Beertown should be dissolved and annexed essentially into the next town over, which is called Praline. And there's so much to talk about, and you just have to say, great.
Okay, yes,
Cool.
and.
Yes, and exactly. And of course, we have to think, like, why would anyone care? Like, we as theater makers, the amount of information that you would have to go through to understand, like, tax law and how you would come to care about the fact that you lived in Beertown and the identity, and why would you vote on whether or not you would want to dissolve your town, et cetera. And we came to understand that we had to have things that people cared about that was somehow connecting real life, my own personal identity outside of the town, somehow connecting with something inside the town. So inside the construct of the theater, inside the construct of the show.
Is that a responsibility of the group that's developing the characters or the group that's developing the plot?
The one that's developing the plot.
The plot.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how exciting for the characters to just be put into
Yes,
that
absolutely.
here's your real life today.
Yeah.
And a real breakthrough came in, as it often does. We know what this is about and everything's going, but someone comes in and says something that makes everything, all the pieces suddenly fit together. And one of our ensemble members came in and said, what if it's time capsule day in this town? And it was based on something they had just watched or a TV show they had
just watched the Parks and Rec
Parks
episode
and Rec.
that was about a time capsule.
Yeah.
And it was meant to sort of be a flippant joke, but after about an hour-long argument, everyone was like, oh no, I think that actually works.
Yeah.
And then the show suddenly became about objects of memory, and we started doing all of this research into objects of memory and museums
And personally, as performers, bringing in objects that are important to us and talking about those, and then you realize the sort of emotion that just, our relationship to objects can carry, and that it's very easy for someone to get very attached to an object they've just seen for the first time based on a story.
And so now you see
Yeah.
these 2 groups suddenly connect, right? Because now you have all of these people and this meaning structure.
Okay, so you all come together, and your rehearsals must be a little difficult if you're missing your audience, and so much is based on the audience.
Yes, and you have pointed out the biggest problem that we have. And the first thing that we did was we held a workshop, and we said, well, the first thing we have to do is test this theory that people will care about the voting and the framework and the stories. So we made a mock-up of the entire show, and we held 4 to 6 performances of it very early to basically test, would people care about the time capsule? Would they vote? When do they feel connected to community, et cetera? Like all of these sort of list of questions that were just about the voting aspect, and were just about the caring, the feeling connected as if they were part of the community.
Okay. Open audience. It's
Yes.
regular.
Oh, it was completely open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we essentially were very experimental in our language. We tested that. And then there's this whole other part of Beer Town, which are referred to as antecedents, which are these little short interstitial, sort of highly theatrical moments that give backstory about the town, that give
A little bit of the flavor and character and sort of magic part of the town.
history, meditation on memory, meditations on deeper thinking and reflections on how we connect with objects. And there's 9 of them in the show. So we created some of those because that's part of the structure, but we knew that those in particular were not as important to us to test. So what was great is we heard, it's amazing, the framework and caring and whatnot, but all of these antecedents, they're a mess and we don't like them. So it was like, terrific! The things that are horrible don't work. And the thing that we needed to work, we just need to do this, that, and the other, right? So then we spent almost 8 months fixing basically 15 minutes of the show. I mean, essentially, which was a work we spent. So those antecedents, which are somewhere between 30 seconds and 3 minutes long a piece, and again, there are 9 of them in the show. We spent about 8 months making them, and there are about 50 of them in existence in the world, some of whom which have never been seen, because we've made so many of them that don't work and that don't do what they're supposed to do. And that we would test them, we'd make them, we'd try them on ourselves, and we'd be like, well, this is horrible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That you get to play like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have not only permission to fail, you're kind of inviting each other to do that.
Yeah, and you are
Right?
saying one of the phrases that we use all the time. It is like, failure is to be expected, failure is to be embraced, and it's like, how do you constantly make that?
Yeah. If I ever leave Hawaii, I'm coming to DC.
Done! So, and then it's about test, and then it's about premiere the show. And we've learned where we did not know then, this was 4.5 years ago, but we embrace now that we know that the premiere of a show for us is really like the final phase of devising. So the
Like
first
the beta version.
it's the beta
Oh,
version of
okay.
the show, and that's what we talk about. So that first, we learned how to do the show over the first run of the show, and the show is run in DC 3 or 4 times. We performed it in New York a couple times. It's now performed.
And even performing it in New York, we
Yeah.
learned something about the show, and we learned
And
how
it's
to
changed.
make sort of the debate portion of the show even more complex and interesting. And it doesn't have to be everybody being nice to each other because we're having this participatory experience. You know, it can be, we can get, the debate can get heated. People get into it and they like it even more. Like even now, we're learning from different audiences regionally.
And the show is actually, we're in conversations and with theaters across the country about how do we actually change the content of the show, change the backstories of the characters, the contents of the time capsule, in order to become slightly more personally resonant with home communities. So in Cleveland or Cincinnati or Honolulu or San Francisco
Diego,
or San Diego or wherever, so that it becomes slightly more closer to home,
Yeah.
but still distant enough and theatrical so that you're able to get even more personally invested.
You are singing my tune now. I'm here because Kumu practices theater of place, almost solely. It's theater of place and community. And that's so meaningful, what it does.
Let's talk.
I know, we really
We gotta go off camera now. Gotta go off camera.
we literally do have to go off camera in about 2 minutes. So, and I thank you so much for giving us such a lovely outline
that,
of how
yeah.
the show comes to fruition, and people come in, and am I getting this right, that people are coming in and they're learning about the town and they are actually voting on what's going into the time
yes.
capsule?
Yeah, and they're voting on time capsule. They're bringing dessert in. So the show starts with a dessert potluck. All audience members are asked to bring a dessert to share. There's commemorative T-shirts. Everyone wears a name tag. We all say the Pledge of Allegiance together. We sing the town hymn. You can go to the town website, which is visitbeertown.com.
Okay.
And it's live. You can go to it now. I encourage everyone watching
about
to
the
go
town.
see it. There's a
Stores.
Facebook page, which is Beertown USA on Facebook, and the city of Beertown is the city's handle. Twitter handle. So you can follow along and really participate with the town as if it is real, which it is in the minds
It
of
kind
many
of is.
people. Yeah.
And it may be coming to a town near you very soon. I thank you so much for being
you
here,
for
and
having
I'm
us.
sorry that you have to fly away because I would love to continue the conversation. Maybe again sometime. Okay, we're going to wrap up now. There's a few things that I need to say before we go. Thank you very much for being here. I would like to thank some people without whom this show would never happen. Our studio engineer, Zuri Bender, our floor managers, Sashi Slomoff, our communications director, Chrissy Goffigan, and Jay Fidel, who somehow manages to put it all together. Join us next week. We will be talking with a new director at Kumakuhoi Theatre who is here visiting us from New Zealand, David O'Donnell. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye.